Hey friends! When I put out a poll asking what games I should talk about next, overwhelmingly, you guys said Factorio. Like, damn, that is not close. Combined with all the requests in the comments, and since y'all seem to like my analyses of Minecraft and Terraria, I think it's time to officially launch the Gymscaling cinematic universe, where, instead of fighting, we just figure out how much these guys can bench. You might think I should finish one of those two series before talking about a third game, but that would be a foolish thing to think. You might also think I should start with one of those 4 games I teased at the end of the last Terraria video, but again, wrong, the answer is Factorio. Before I get into it, the algorithm is doing its algorithm thing, so if you enjoy, then please, remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with your thoughts. Now then, let's answer the question, how much can the engineer lift? First things first, we need to set up our base assumptions. Like always, I am assuming that things in the inventory have mass. In the other games, there's magic and advanced technology that could explain the inventory as some kind of pocket dimension, but not only do I personally find that explanation pretty lame, we also see nothing like that in this game. So, I think we can safely assume that Fred Factorio does in fact lift the weight of all the items he carries around. Secondly, Factorio does this really cool thing where, when a crafting recipe has waste products, you get the waste products. And, even better, when a recipe doesn't use all of its ingredients, you get the extras back. Meaning, in most cases, we can do my favorite thing and assume crafting conserves mass. Big win. The hardest part of this video is honestly just figuring out how to even weigh stuff. We do have mostly real-world materials, which is cool, but most things in the game are complex combinations of those base resources, and most of the items aren't easy to measure either because of the fixed camera angles and static item sprites. Even the stuff with known densities can have pretty fuzzy volumes, and since we need both of those things to calculate mass, that's a bit of a problem. So here's what we're gonna do. We can do some pixel measurements on the items when they're in-world, like on belts for example, and then compare them to the height of the Factorian to estimate lengths. But every single item we do this with will increase the margin of error for our final result, since, for more complex sprites, we basically need to guess what the shape looks like in 3D. So, I'm gonna try to keep the number of items directly measured to a minimum, prioritizing the simplest shapes, and then see how far we can get measuring everything else, either by looking at what the measured items can craft, or by looking at the ones that craft them. I hope that makes sense. Luckily, we can start with 2 very clear shapes, the copper plate and the iron plate. First, the player is ambiguously gendered, but clearly an adult, so we can start by assuming that they're 170 centimeters tall. The sprite is around 150 pixels tall, so we're working with a scale of about 1.12 centimeters per pixel. Our 2 plates are both very thin rectangular prisms with approximate dimensions of 30 by 30 by 4 pixels, or 33.6 by 33.6 by 4.5 centimeters, making them 0.005 cubic meters per item. Since they're also both made of reasonably pure metals with known densities, those being 8,960 kilograms per cubic meter for copper and 7,870 kilograms per cubic meter for iron, I can assert with confidence that these items have masses of 45 and 40 kilograms, or 206 Big Macs and 136 Whoppers respectively. They are a huge part of the game. Just those 2 items alone make up the total raw resources needed for 44 out of the 296 items in Factorio, and we can get even more out of them. Steel plates are considered a separate resource in the usual raw resource breakdowns, but they are made using only iron plates, meaning we can weigh them off of the iron plates, and include all of the resources that use them on top of the other 2 items, giving us these 23 extra things, and bringing us to a total of 67 items, or 23% of our catalog. Now that we've got steel, we can also make another item that's usually listed separately, the engine unit, which fills out a handful of more items, bringing us to 72. I should specify that I am pulling these recipes from the Factorio wiki. I did my best to verify as many of them as I could in-game, but since I've already seen at least one instance of different pages on the wiki showing different recipes for the same item, if any of my final recipes are still off, blame them. Remember, I am infallible and nothing is ever my fault. Speaking of errors, the eagle-eyed among you might have noticed that the ores for iron and copper are not among the items with known masses, and that isn't a mistake. Like I said before, we can work backwards to measure ingredients from their products, and we will end up doing that, but only in situations where we know crafting conserves mass. And smelting ore is a rare case where we actually know the opposite. For those who haven't played in a while, in 2024, Factorio got its first and currently only DLC, the Space Age. It added a bunch of stuff, including several entire planets, but most importantly for right now, it also added metal casting. By casting with either molten copper or molten iron, we can make both plates and some other stuff, like copper wire, more efficiently than we can by smelting the ore. Meaning, we can deduce that, like real-world ores, these are not pure copper and iron, but instead full of impurities. To keep our numbers accurate, we'll use casting to craft every item that we can. We can measure the molten metals by starting with the pure metal plates, and then use those figures to make the cables and gears and everything else. For the ores, we can still include them by multiplying the final weight by the inverse of the metal content of their typical ore. For example, copper is most commonly found in the form of chalcopyrite, which is around 35% copper by mass. So we can multiply the copper content of our copper ore, calculated from the plate it makes, by 2.86 to get the total ore mass. And then we can do the same thing with iron using its most common ore, hematite. Now we have our first fluids, but when it comes to other colder liquids, they're a huge part of the game, and a lot of them have known densities, while their volumes are a little trickier. It's not like we ever see what one water looks like in-game. But we can tell that units of different liquids do share the same volume, because you can always put the same amount in a barrel. Because barrels are always the same size as other barrels, and because all barrels can hold 50 units of various liquids, those units must represent a constant volume. Among the liquids that the barrel can't store are the molten metals, meaning we can't work backwards from them to figure out what that consistent volume is. Instead, we have to look towards another item introduced in the Space Age, and the third item we'll measure directly, the ice cube. Back to pixel measurements, the side length of our ice cube is 24 pixels or around 27 centimeters. It is a tiny bit skewed, but still cubey enough to say that makes the volume just under 0.02 cubic meters. The density of ice is lower than that of water, about 920 kilograms per cubic meter at freezing, so this is 17.8 kilograms or 148 fedoras of ice. We can melt it into the same mass of water, represented in-game as 20 units of water, putting each unit at 0.89 kilograms or 0.00089 cubic meters. We can use that volume to measure almost all the liquids in the game, but since some of them will be measurable in other ways, let's focus on these 6 for now. Water, lithium brine, and ammoniacal solution all have reasonably standard densities, but I do have a quick note about that last one. When making ammonia with the solution, you do also get ice as a waste product, but if I subtract the weight of the ice from the weight of the inputs, we get ammonia as having a negative mass. So I'm going to assume this piece of ice represents this process being endothermic instead of ice being a literal byproduct, only because I think that makes more sense than ammonia having negative mass, but I guess let me know if you disagree. With those covered, the 3 oils do also have some stuff to clear up. Crude oil, for example, has a pretty wide range of densities, to the point that my first thought for light and heavy oils were varieties of crude. But in Factorio, they specifically refer to products from processing, not varieties. So we can go with a reasonable middle ground for crude oil of, let's say, 850 kilograms per cubic meter. Now we have to identify what those products are, and fun fact, just like everything else I have to research for this channel, oil processing is super complicated. And I just barely understand it myself, but I do think we have enough information to make judgment calls on both kinds of processed oil and petroleum gas. I could measure all of them with respect to crude oil using the refining recipes, but because of how complicated refining is, and because there's multiple contradictory ways to get these items through refining, I think it would be safer to assume that these recipes represent different processing methods with different loss rates. So, since we're dealing with lossy crafting, we should identify the products separately. Starting with heavy oil, not only is it called heavy oil, so we should look on the denser side, but it's also used as the base to make lubricant. So I think we're looking at a vacuum distillate, which is a product of vacuum distillation. The science is complicated, but the naming scheme is not. Vacuum distillation is exactly what it sounds like. You can use low pressure to purify certain intermediate petroleum oils. But importantly, vacuum distillate is an excellent starting point for industrial-grade lube. It has an average density of around 900 kilograms per cubic meter, so we'll use that for heavy oil. Next up, light oil can be made into a reliable solid fuel more efficiently than the other options, or alternatively, it can be cracked into petroleum gas. So my guess is naphtha, the primary ingredient in lighter fluid. It fills both requirements while staying on the light end of 700 kilograms per cubic meter. And finally, petroleum gas is easily the most clear. Its item sprite shows a molecule of ethylene, which just so happens to not only be one of the most abundant gases produced in refining, but also has usage in making plastic. So, I think that's what it is. Altogether, that brought us 22 new items, giving us 34% total coverage and making this one of the most important ice cubes in video games. One of the biggest blockers we still have for weighing the rest is plastic bars, and since we just weighed one of its two components, petroleum gas, let's look towards the other one. Coal is used in a lot of things, even other than plastic, like explosives, and while we could measure it directly, it isn't exactly the easiest shape. Luckily, we can also synthesize coal using stuff we've already covered, plus carbon, another item introduced in the space age. It's a very useful update. Carbon looks like a regular hexagonal prism, meaning its volume can be expressed as 3√3/2 times the square of the side length times the height. The side length is 24 pixels, or about 27 centimeters, and the height is 14 pixels, or about 16 centimeters, making the volume just under 0.03 cubic meters. As far as what form of carbon this is, based on what it looks like, I'm going to guess graphite, which has a density of 2,200 kilograms per cubic meter, putting the item at 64.5 kilograms, or 3.23 good girls of mass. Alongside coal and plastic, carbon gave us 69 new items, bringing us past the halfway point to 57% coverage. Stone still has a lot locked behind it, we could do that quickly. Stone bricks are rectangular prisms. They have a volume of 0.011 cubic meters, and I'm going to guess it's limestone. I have no evidence for that, but get off my back about it. Limestone has a density of 2,500 kilograms per cubic meter, putting the stone brick at 28 kilos or 46.4 emu eggs, and bringing our coverage to 66%. But now we've hit a bit of a wall. Almost everything left to measure is pretty isolated pockets of resources. We'll still cover as many items as possible, but we have enough to start looking back at our original question. If we sort everything we have so far, we find that the heaviest individual thing already measured is the Power Armor Mark II, which makes now a good time to address how we're handling armor. We have these slots down here for weapons, ammo, and armor, and obviously they do count as the engineer carrying them since they're part of the inventory. Certain armors, like the power armor, are not only very heavy themselves, but also expand the general inventory. But I'm going to rule that they do not count for our purposes. Because of the nature and names of these things, I'm pretty sure they're intended to be like a powered exoskeleton, which augments your physical strength, and we're trying to figure out how much the engineer can lift, not how much this armor can. So, power armor is officially banned in Gymscaling. Further down on our list of measured items, we see the nuclear reactor, which makes sense to be so high, those things are pretty big. But that's also a good lead on where to go next, because while the nuclear reactor is fully measured, many other nuclear items are not, so let's take a look in that realm. The key limiting item here is uranium, for fission at least, we'll come back to that. Uranium can't be measured through anything except pretty much other forms of uranium, and the shape of the ore is less than ideal. But, based on the recipe for processing, we know that it's 1/10 the mass of both isotopes, although the more fissile uranium-235 is much rarer than 238. Luckily, the uranium items are also roughly hexagonal prisms, although they do have some irregularity like this chunk at the back, so let's add 10% to the end to be safe. The density of uranium-238 is a very heavy 19,050 kilograms per cubic meter, making this 187 kilograms or 8.5 twin matrices of uranium, and bringing us to 70% coverage. One of the new items we have covered now is the portable fission reactor, which comes in at almost double the weight of its non-portable counterpart, bringing its name firmly into question. What makes it portable is that it can be used to upgrade certain armors, but most of the ones that can accept upgrades are power armor, which we've already covered. But we do have one additional option in the modular armor. It still expands the inventory, but I think in this case it's more of a pocket situation. The modular armor gives us a 5x5 grid for upgrades, but they come in different sizes, like the portable reactor taking up 16 of our 25 slots. So, maximizing the weight of the armor will require accounting for both the weight and the size of the modules. Not super important quite yet, but something to keep in mind. If we take a look at the items we haven't fully covered, it looks like things like the Spidertron and the portable fusion reactor are already frontrunners for weight despite not having all of their components measured. So, let's take a look at what's missing. For the Spidertron, we need carbon fiber, and for the portable fusion reactor, we need carbon fiber on top of holmium, lithium, tungsten, and fluoroketone. So, let's start with the first one. Carbon fiber is made with carbon and Umico mash, which is a small problem, because there are things in the game that even at the end, we won't be able to reasonably estimate beyond complete speculation, and all of them will be organic stuff. Both because organisms like fish definitely do not conserve mass from their creation, since they eat and grow and stuff, but also because organic tissues vary so wildly in density that when something is completely fictional, like spider eggs, there isn't usually enough information for me to confidently make a judgment call. When it comes to plants, there are three main important ones we deal with in this game: trees, jelly nut, and Umico. For trees, the wood item takes the form of 3 easily measured cylinders, and wood is a real material. The exact species is vague, but I'll use oak wood, making these logs weigh as much as 11 kilograms or 7.65 copies of the Binding of Isaac 4 souls. For jelly nuts, they can be made into jelly, which can be made into lubricant that would otherwise come from heavy oil. We already handled that earlier. And likewise, for Yumiko, it's not a real thing, but its usage in making carbon fiber is an important clue. The fabrication of carbon fiber is really complicated, but to simplify a lot, it does usually use an organic polymer precursor. Despite the name, not all organic materials in chemistry actually come from organisms, and most of the ones that we usually use to make carbon fibers are either synthetic or don't come from plants, with the almost sole exception of cellulose. So we can safely assume that that's probably what this ball of Yumiko mash is. About 2.8 kilograms or 149 unladen swallows of it, to be precise. When it comes to those other 4 ingredients, 3 of them are metals, but none of them are pure when in their simplest shapes. Tungsten plates require molten copper, holmium plates require stone, and while lithium plates do only require lithium, making lithium requires holmium plates, so we have to get a little more creative. Tungsten is the easiest. We can just measure tungsten carbide instead, since that also has a known density, and then subtract the masses of the known ingredients to get tungsten ore. The shape is a little more complicated, but it's around 0.0068 cubic meters with a density of 15,630 kilograms per cubic meter and a mass of 106 kilograms or 159 steam decks. For holmium, I spent a long time on research for this video under the assumption that holmium is a made-up thing and trying to analyze the fulgurites it comes from, since those are a real thing. And while fulgurites are really cool, I'll have to figure out a different excuse to talk about them, because as it turns out, I could have saved myself a lot of time if I had just glanced at this thing, because there it is. Holmium is a rare earth element that only appears in trace amounts on Earth. Like I said, its plate is impure, but because it has no known proper ores to figure out what the impurities would be, I'm going to assume that holmium ore is reasonably pure itself. It's not a super safe assumption, but it's the best I can do. What's even worse is that this is the single most complicated shape we'll be measuring. But working through it, we can estimate that the volume is around 0.0055 cubic meters. Real-world holmium has a density of 8,795 kilograms per cubic meter for a mass of 48 kilograms or 0.62 Elon's musk. It's also used to make lithium along with ammonia and lithium brine, both of which we measured earlier with the other fluids. One of the fluids we didn't cover was fluoroketone in both its hot and cold forms. First, we have to identify it. Ketones are a category of organic molecule, but while some of them are fluorinated, I don't think this is one of them. Besides crafting, in-game fluoroketone has another major use in cooling active fusion reactors, and like everything else I've looked at, the details of how you cool a fusion reactor is unsurprisingly pretty complicated. While some ketones have use in some cooling, even some fluorinated ones, they don't move nearly the amount of heat we would need them to, and they normally follow liquid vapor cycles, where they evaporate to take heat away. While in Factorio, this stuff is liquid in both hot and cold forms. On top of that, if we take a look at the ingredients in its recipe, we see lithium to go with the fluoride, which isn't really found in ketones. This doesn't really look like the recipe for any organic compound, but it does look like the recipe for lithium fluoride, which, conveniently enough, can be used to cool reactors. It has nothing to do with the name, but all the other evidence lines up better. Since lithium fluoride has a known density, and since fluoroketone can be put in barrels like other liquids, that means we've now measured everything we need to weigh our fusion reactor, and it brings us to our final coverage of over 90% of the items in the game. Here are the remaining 29 items. Like I said, due to the nature of living things, a solid estimate on all of these would be pretty difficult to get just based on the sprites, and even if we could, I highly doubt they'd outweigh stuff we do have, so I'm not too worried about it. But still, let me know if you have any ideas. Now, we can get back to the thesis of this video. If we look at our finished spreadsheet, we can see that the portable fusion reactors do end up being the heaviest item in the game, and they also have the heaviest stack, since Factorio has all different kinds of wacky stack sizes. So that'll end up filling most of Fred's inventory. For his equipment, we need to dig a little deeper, but it still ends up a lot simpler than some of the other games. For guns and ammo, between both groups, the heaviest stack goes to the atomic bomb, and since you can only equip guns with matching ammunition, we're stuck with the rocket launcher, even though the railgun weighs more. For armor, we already picked out the modular set, but for the upgrades, we need to go through every option and divide its weight by the upgrade space it takes up. If we do that, we find that the lighter but more compact Personal Battery Mark III beats out the portable fusion reactor for the heaviest module per unit of space. So, the heaviest set of upgrades looks like this, with belt immunity equipment making up the difference, but we aren't going to use this setup. Because, while it isn't the heaviest upgrade relative to space, a stack of portable fusion reactors is still, by far, the heaviest way to fill up an inventory slot. And for every tool belt we equip, we can get 10 additional slots to fill with them. And if we use high-quality ones, that buff can jump up to 25 slots each. We can fit up to 5 tool belts on the modular armor, making our upgrades look like this and giving us 225 total slots. Despite how complicated the game can get, that's pretty much the extent of the inventory, and as far as I know, there's no other ways to carry anything else that doesn't involve mechanical assistance, so we can tally it all up. If we put on our modular armor, equip it with 2 belt immunity equipment, 4 personal batteries Mark III, and 5 max quality tool belts, then get 3 rocket launchers, each loaded with 10 atomic bombs, and fill our inventory with 4,500 portable fusion reactors, then the engineer would be lifting 8,457,859,200 kilograms, which is 83.1 giganewtons, 18.7 billion pounds, or 7.8 million 2,500 elantras. That may not be as much as the other guys we've analyzed, especially Steve, but it's still an unfathomable amount of weight for a person to have on their back. That's 50% more mass than the Pyramid of Giza, or, in more understandable units, 83.3 million cryogenic science packs, a very small percentage of Brazil, 42 million Yveltals, 9.3 duodecillion electrons, or 21.1 million Blowhigh-R. You know, before making this video, I hadn't actually played that much Factorio. I did a little years ago, but I never wanted to get too into it because I am the exact kind of person that this genre could devour the life of. And having to play for this video, yeah, I get why people dump their entire weekends into this stuff. Anyway, if you like what I do and you want to help me keep doing it, I do have a Patreon and YouTube memberships. Shout out to my overthinker, DJ Monkey 777. He got the video a day early, and so can you. Or, on the cheaper side, you can also let YouTube know I'm a cool guy by liking the video, commenting, and subscribing to the channel. Also, whatever the hype button does. I really should know that by now, it isn't all that new anymore, but I still don't know. I also have a Discord, come join if you want to say hi or talk about games, and comment below if I missed anything, what units you understand, and what characters I should do next. Or, if you don't have any thoughts about any of that, let me know what your favorite season of the year is. I like the fall. I'm a fall guy. In the meantime, just know, there's a reason we never need cranes or anything. Fred Factorio is just built different. And stay nice, everyone.